Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in to my second video of the 900D Elite build log series. So in this series we're going to be installing the rest of the components as well as installing the tubing and getting it prepped and ready for to fill the loop. So here I went ahead and installed the graphics cards and my sound card and my network card in there already, just to kind of start this video off. You know, it's a little boring maybe to just see me do that. So I went ahead and installed that first. So now what we're going to do is install the pump and the tubing. So what we're going to do now is take a look at the pump and how I'm going to mount this pump at the bottom of the case. So the pump that we're going to be using is the Coolant's PMP 450S Strong pump. Now this pump could be operated at 12 volts or up to 24 volts. So we could definitely going to use a mod on this to bump it up to 24 volts. But to mount this, there's a couple options we have. We have the bottom plate on there with the holes that we could screw directly to the case if we drilled some holes. But what I'm going to use is just some double-sided tape. Now this tape is really strong. It's not going to go anywhere, and the great thing about using double-sided tape is that it's removable. So if you ever want to use your pump in another build, you could definitely take it out. And what's also great is that it's thick tape, so it's going to cut a lot of the vibration from the pump from transferring into your case. So this is the 24 volt pump mod that I'm going to be using. Now this is a 12 volt DC to 24 volt DC step up converter basically, and it's very easy to install. You install one end of the power of the pump into one of the Molex plugs and the other into your Molex plug from your power supply. Now I cannot stress this enough, do not use this on every pump because this only works on pumps that are able to use the 24 volts. You know, if it's a 12 volt pump and you put this on there and you turn it on, you'll fry your pump out. So do not use this on every pump. Again, it's for the pumps that are spec to run at 24 volts as well. So this is going to give you a good 25% increase in flow and about 18% in head pressure. So it's definitely worth the money instead of having to buy another pump. So what I did was I went ahead and took out the hard drive cages to give us a little more room underneath there to install our pump and do all the cable management stuff. So this is where I decided to put the pump. It's going to be fitted right underneath the reservoir, so it's basically just going to drop straight down out of the outlet of the reservoir into the intake of the top of the pump. And then it's going to go from the pump to the 480 millimeter radiator in the bottom, then out the back. So this is a very good spot. It worked out great. There's a lot of room down there, so even with the radiator and the fan there, to mount the pump and put it to where I want it. And what I'll do is I'll install the U24 pump mod actually on the other side of that. So the fan controller that I'm going to be using is a 6-channel fan controller. So what that means with the 8 fans that I want to run is I need to find some splitters or Y cables that I could run more than one fan off each channel. So what I have here are a whole bunch of 3-pin extension cables, and here's our Y cable that we're actually going to be using to hook up 2 fans to 1 channel. So we'll be able to run easily our 8 fans on these 6 channels. Now these fans don't use a whole lot of watts. So what you want to do is if you are going to run multiple fans off each channel, you got to make sure that that channel could support that wattage. And I think the fan controller on mine is 12 watts each channel, so that should be plenty for 2 fans each. Okay, so what I went ahead and did is did something I've never done before, and that is to make my own custom sleeved extension cables. These are all fully sleeved, made from scratch. These are using the Lutro Customs cordless paracord, and it looks, I think I did a pretty good job. I don't know, what do you guys think? It's my first time sleeving, and there we go. I don't, it wasn't that hard to be honest. And what I'm going to be doing is making a whole separate video on how to actually make your very own custom sleeve extensions just like these from scratch. And what I'll do is actually add that video after I get done with this series, so it doesn't kind of like interfere with it. So, but here we are. I'm using colonial blue, charcoal gray, and black are my colors for this color scheme. Of course, the build is obviously black and blue, but I think the gray kind of looks really cool, I think, with the blue, and it kind of breaks it up a little bit. So, so yeah, just keep, subscribe for that. It'll be coming pretty soon. Like I said, I'll be making a whole video on how to do that. So now that we've installed everything else, it's time to get down to installing the tubing. So the tubing that we're going to be using is Duralene. It's 1/2 inch inner diameter by 3/4 inch outer diameter, and I really like to use this tubing not only because it's cheap, but because it's very flexible, and in my experience it lasts quite a long time. And I usually like to at least upgrade one of the components once a year, so I usually tear my system apart anyway, so having a tubing that lasts a long time doesn't really matter to me. So here we go, we're ready to install the first tubing. Now, I generally like to start toward the top of the case and then work my way down. So what I'll do is install the tubing coming out of the 360mm radiator at the top and going into my MOSFET block. So how to do this is very simple. I usually like to measure a lot more, more over than what I actually need, because you could always cut the tubing down. So here I am about to install the very first piece of tubing. Now I measured it out a little extra, so I'll be cutting some off. And that's always good to make sure you do a little more, just because you know you can never put more tubing onto it, and then you'll be wasting that piece of tubing. So here I am installing it, and you can see there's water driplets inside the tubing. And what I like to do beforehand is flush the tubing out with some water. That gets a lot of the just chemicals out from the factory, and just make sure that your system's nice and clean. Now you definitely want to make sure you flush out your rads if you have brand new rads, because there's a lot of solder and crap inside the radiator that you want to get out before going into your loop. And and that's very important. Definitely make sure you flush out your rads if it's brand new. So here we go, we have it installed, and we have the collars on there. Now all we have to do is tighten them back onto the fittings, and that will give you a very secure fit. It should not leak. Compression fittings are very good for that. The collar, you screw it onto the fitting, it actually pinches the tubing underneath the barbs on the fitting. So it makes a very tight seal, and that's why I like using compression fittings over barbs. And I think personally they look better, but you can see I'm kind of testing it out. I think I actually took this part off and then recut a new piece, because I don't think I like how it was sagging. So yeah, I think I redid it. But anyway, that's the very first part. So we're going to go ahead and continue. Okay, so I went ahead and went a little further. I got the tubing from the 360 to my MOSFET, and then to my MOSFET to the back of the 120, and then from the 120 into my CPU block. So this is how it's looking pretty good. This is how it's looking pretty good. This is how it's looking good right. Oh my god. This is how it's looking right now. um, so what we'll do is go ahead and continue on. Okay, so now we got from the CPU block, we're going straight into the GPU block, and it's going into the other GPU block, and we're using a link for that, Coulant's VID link, and then out of the GPU block, and then it's going kind of curving. I kind of like how they did the little curve. It was taking me forever to figure out what I want to do there, but anyway, I figured it out, and got back going into the reservoir, and then last thing that we got to do is put the tubing from the reservoir down straight into the pump. And here we have the tubing complete. Now I kind of forgot to mention I also had to connect the bottom 480mm radiator to the pump and then out the back. But I got that taken care of, and I'm showing you the completed loop right now. So it goes from the reservoir, then it drops straight down into the pump. Then it goes from the pump to the the bottom 480mm right there that you can see. Then out of the 480mm radiator, it's going to come up the back. It goes up the back, and then it's going to go right into the 360mm radiator at the top. And I like to mention that there's plenty of space behind the 900D for that tubing. It fits no problem whatsoever. It's really nice, especially when you have a lot of the other cables that have to loop over that or around it. It fits no problem. And then it comes out from the 360 into the MOSFET, and then back into the loop that I mentioned before. So that about sums up the second part of the 900D Elite build log series. I'd like to thank all you guys for watching. Please comment, rate, subscribe. And for the next part, because the next part we're going to be filling the loop, and we got a lot of information that I want to share in this video, as well as filling the loop. So I think it's going to be exciting. And again, thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.